As the night gets darker and the world outside goes quiet, we often seek comfort in our locked doors and drawn blinds. But sometimes the things that keep us awake aren't ghosts or monsters. Sometimes it's just a bad decision, a joke taken too far, a prank that invited the wrong kind of attention. Tonight I have 3 allegedly true stories of pranks that went horribly, realistically wrong. So settle in, turn down the lights, and let the stories pull you into the dark. This happened when I was 16. It was the early 2000s, and my best friend Josh was sleeping over at my house. My parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving us with the run of the place. We lived in a quiet, somewhat isolated suburban neighborhood, where the houses were separated by thick patches of woods. Boredom set in around midnight. In a bout of teenage stupidity, we decided to make prank calls. We weren't using burner apps. We were just typing *67 to hide our number and dialing random combinations of our local area code. Most people just hung up. Some yelled. It was harmless juvenile fun. Then someone answered. It wasn't a groggy voice or an angry parent. It was just breathing. Slow, steady breathing. Josh, who was holding the phone on speaker, chuckled and asked if their refrigerator was running. The classic stupid line. The person on the other end didn't hang up. The breathing stopped, replaced by a deep, raspy voice. It didn't sound angry. It sounded completely calm, almost amused. The voice just said, "Look out your front window." Josh and I froze. The laughter died in our throats. It was a lucky guess, right? A standard counter prank. We lived on a dark street. Nobody could know who we were. Josh ended the call immediately. We convinced ourselves it was just a creepy coincidence and decided we were done with the phone for the night. We moved to the living room to play video games, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. About an hour later, the landline phone in the kitchen rang. Nobody called the landline at 1 a.m. We stared at it from the living room. It rang 3 times, then stopped. A minute later, my cell phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was an unknown number. I didn't answer it. I let it go to voicemail. The notification popped up. 1 new voicemail. I played it on speaker. It was the same raspy voice from before. But this time, the background noise wasn't silence. It was the sound of wind and crickets. The exact same crickets I could hear chirping outside my own window. The voice spoke again, slower this time. I said, "Look out your front window. You left the porch light on." My blood ran cold. My porch light was on. I crept toward the living room window, keeping my body pressed against the wall. I slowly pulled back the edge of the heavy curtain, just enough to peek out. Standing at the end of my driveway, just at the edge of the illumination from the street lamp, was a man. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, holding a cell phone to his ear with one hand. His other hand was resting on the mailbox. Our mailbox. He wasn't moving. He was just staring directly at the window I was looking out of. I dropped the curtain and backed away, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I whispered to Josh to call the police. We turned off every light in the house and locked ourselves in my parents' bathroom upstairs, armed with a baseball bat. The police arrived 15 minutes later. The man was gone. They searched the perimeter and found nothing but cigarette butts near the mailbox and a set of heavy boot prints in the mud under the living room window. He hadn't just been standing in the driveway. He had walked right up to the glass while we were playing video games. We never found out who he was, or how he traced our *67 calls so fast. But I never made a prank call again, and to this day, I refuse to sleep with the window uncovered. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, meaning camping was just a regular part of summer. A few years ago, when I was in my early 20s, two of my friends, Mark and Liam, and I decided to hike into a deep, unmanaged part of the state forest. We wanted to get away from the crowded campsites and find some real isolation. We found a clearing about 5 miles off the main trail. It was beautiful during the day, but as soon as the sun dipped behind the massive pines, the darkness became absolute. There is a specific kind of silence in deep woods that feels heavy, almost suffocating. Around 11 p.m., we were sitting around the dying fire. Mark and Liam were deep in conversation about a movie. I decided this was the perfect time for a scare. I told them I had to go to the bathroom and grabbed my flashlight. My plan was simple. I would walk out of the glow of the fire, loop around behind our large 6-person tent, and start snapping twigs and scratching at the fabric. A cheap, easy scare to get their adrenaline going. I walked into the tree line, turned off my flashlight to let my eyes adjust, and carefully navigated through the brush. I positioned myself about 20 feet behind the back of the tent. I could see the soft orange glow of the fire, illuminating the front, casting Mark and Liam's shadows against the trees. I reached down to pick up a thick branch to snap, but before my hand touched the ground, I heard a snap from a few yards to my left. I froze. I assumed it was a deer or a raccoon. I stayed perfectly still, waiting for the animal to pass. Then I heard footsteps, not the frantic scattering of an animal, but the slow, deliberate crunch of heavy boots on dry leaves. Someone was walking, and they were walking straight toward the back of our tent. My eyes had adjusted to the dark just enough to make out silhouettes. A figure stepped out from behind a massive pine tree, no more than 15 feet away from me. It was a person, a large man, dressed in dark clothing. He didn't have a flashlight. He was moving in pitch blackness with alarming ease. My breath caught in my throat. I was terrified to move, terrified to make a sound. If I yelled to warn my friends, this guy would know exactly where I was hiding in the dark. The man stopped right behind the tent, inches from the nylon fabric. I watched, paralyzed, as he slowly raised his arm. In his hand, I could barely make out the shape of something long and metallic. A pipe, or maybe a large knife. Inside the tent, Mark laughed at something Liam said. The sound was incredibly loud in the quiet forest. The man outside the tent tilted his head, listening to them. Then he raised his other hand and slowly, deliberately, began to drag his fingernails down the nylon fabric of the tent. Zip. "Hey, quit it, man," I heard Liam call out from the fire. "We know it's you, not funny." They thought it was me. The man paused. He slowly turned his head, looking out into the dark forest, scanning the area, scanning for whoever they were talking to. He was looking for me. I stopped breathing entirely. I pressed myself as hard as I could against the tree trunk behind me. For an eternity, the man just stood there. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand, turned around and walked back into the dense tree line, completely silent. I waited a full 20 minutes before I finally sprinted back to the fire, pale and shaking. I told them to pack up immediately. We left the tent, the fire, everything, and hiked 5 miles back to the car in the dark, with our knives drawn. We called the park rangers the next morning. When they went to check our site, our tent was completely slashed to ribbons. When I was in college, I rented a cheap, run-down house off campus with a guy named David. David was a good roommate, but he had an annoying habit. He loved practical jokes. His favorite thing to do was hide behind doors or in closets when I came home from my late shifts at the library, jumping out to scare the life out of me. After a few months, I got used to it. I started anticipating it. If a room was too quiet or a door was slightly ajar, I knew David was waiting. It became a routine. One night in November, I came home around 2 a.m. The house was completely dark. David's car was in the driveway, which meant he was home and asleep, or waiting to ambush me. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, tossing my keys into the bowl on the entryway table. The house was dead silent. I locked the deadbolt behind me and took off my coat. As I walked toward the kitchen to get a glass of water, I heard it. the unmistakable creak of the floorboards at the top of the stairs. I rolled my eyes. It was 2 a.m. I was exhausted, and I wasn't in the mood. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was waiting at the top of the dark staircase, ready to lunge when I walked past. "I hear you, David," I called out into the dark hallway, my voice dripping with exhaustion. "It's 2 a.m. I'm going to bed. The joke is over." There was no response, just silence. I sighed, poured my water, and started walking toward the stairs. I flipped the switch for the hallway light, but the bulb had burned out, of course. Typical David. Probably unscrewed it just to add to the atmosphere. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up into the pitch black second floor. "Seriously, man, I'm coming up. Don't jump at me. I'm holding a glass of water." I took the first step, then the second. Suddenly my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sudden vibration startled me more than David ever could. I pulled it out. The screen illuminated the dark stairwell. It was a text message from David. "Hey man, sorry to text so late. Sarah got sick, so I'm staying over at her place tonight to take care of her. I took her car so you wouldn't be blocked in. See you tomorrow." I stopped on the third step. I read the text again. My brain struggled to process the information. If David took his girlfriend's car, why was his car in the driveway? Because he had let his brother borrow it for the week. I had completely forgotten. David wasn't home. The house was perfectly silent again. The glow from my phone screen was the only light. I slowly raised my head and looked up into the darkness at the top of the stairs. Then I heard the floorboard creak again, but this time it wasn't the sound of someone shifting their weight. It was the sound of someone taking a step forward, toward the top of the stairs. I didn't say another word. I dropped the glass of water. It shattered on the hardwood floor. I spun around, sprinted to the front door, fumbled with the deadbolt, and threw myself out into the freezing night. I ran 3 blocks to a 24-hour gas station and called 911. The police cleared the house. They found the back window in the kitchen had been pried open. And in my bedroom, directly across from the top of the stairs, they found muddy boot prints standing right behind my bedroom door. Whoever was up there hadn't broken in to steal anything. They had been waiting for me to come upstairs. And if I hadn't thought it was a prank, I would have walked right up to them in the dark. The scariest thing about a prank isn't the jump scare. It's a moment of realization, the split second where your brain tells you that the person you thought was playing a trick on you isn't there at all, and the person who is there isn't joking. Lock your doors tonight, check your windows, and remember, not every noise in the dark is a friend trying to make you laugh.